They say justice is blind, but in Judge William Prescott's courtroom, she wasn't just blind. She was gagged, bound, and thrown out the back door. Everyone in Oak Creek knew the unwritten rule. If you were wealthy and well-connected, you got a pass. But if you looked like Naomi, you were guilty until proven broke. When Judge Prescott saw an older black woman in a faded hoodie standing before his bench, he didn't see a formidable legal mind. He saw a punchline. He laughed in her face. He mocked her voice. He thought he was the king of his little castle, but he had no idea that the woman he was trying to humiliate wasn't just a defendant. She was his boss's boss's boss, and she wasn't there to plead for mercy. She was there to deliver a verdict he would never forget. Have you ever been underestimated by someone in power because of how you looked or spoke? How did you handle it? Did you stay quiet, or did you fight back? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you love stories where the arrogant bullies finally get exactly what they deserve, hit that like button right now. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a dose of satisfying justice. Now let's see how Judge Prescott's reign of terror came to a crashing halt. Main story. Narrator. The air conditioning in the Oak Creek County courthouse had been broken since 98. Or at least that's what it felt like. The air was thick, smelling of floor wax, stale coffee, and the nervous sweat of people who knew their lives were about to change for the worse. Naomi Caldwell sat in the back row of courtroom 4B, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was 62 years old, with skin the color of deep mahogany and graying hair pulled back into a simple, no-nonsense bun. Today she wasn't wearing the heavy silken black robes that usually draped her shoulders in Washington, D.C. Today, she wore a pair of gray sweatpants, comfortable sneakers, and a slightly oversized navy blue hoodie that said Myrtle Beach in cracking white letters. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. She looked, to the untrained eye, like someone who had given up. But Naomi's eyes were sharp. They darted around the room, cataloging everything. She watched the bailiff, a heavy-set man named Mitchum, scrolling on his phone while a young man tried to ask him where to stand. She watched the court clerk, Susan, rolling her eyes as she shuffled files, treating the paperwork of human lives like junk mail. And mostly she watched the man on the bench, Judge William Prescott. He was a local legend, but not for the right reasons. He was a man of about 50 with a flushed, ruddy complexion and thinning blonde hair slicked back with too much gel. He didn't sit in his chair. He lounged, leaning back as if the courtroom were his personal living room, and the defendants were unwanted guests interrupting his football game. Naomi had heard the rumors about Prescott for years. She had family in Oak Creek. Her niece, Vanessa, lived just 3 streets over from the courthouse. Vanessa had called Naomi in tears 2 weeks ago. "Auntie," Vanessa had sobbed. He didn't even listen. He just looked at Jamal, saw his tattoos, and gave him the maximum sentence for a first-time noise complaint. He called him a thug on the record. It's not right. Naomi had listened, her heart tightening. She knew the statistics. She knew the reality of the justice system better than almost anyone alive. But hearing it happen to her own blood, in the town where she'd been born, struck a different chord. It wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal. So Naomi had taken a leave of absence. She told her clerk she was going on a fishing trip. She didn't tell them she was going fishing for a shark. "Next!" Judge Prescott bellowed, banging his gavel. Not for order, but for effect. A young woman stepped up, trembling. She was there for an unpaid parking ticket. She tried to explain that she had been in the hospital when the ticket was issued. "I don't care about your medical history." "Miss Davis," Prescott cut her off, his voice dripping with bored arrogance. "I care about the city's revenue. Double the fine." Payment plan denied. Next. The girl burst into tears, but Bailiff Mitchum just steered her away by the elbow. Naomi's jaw set. She felt that familiar burn in her chest, the cold fire that had driven her through law school, through the endless nights of study, through the skepticism of professors who told her she'd be better, suited as a paralegal. She reached into a canvas tote bag and touched the file inside. It wasn't a case file. It was a property deed. Today she wasn't Justice Caldwell. Today she was just Naomi. She had orchestrated a minor property dispute regarding her late mother's shed, a trivial matter that required a hearing. She had intentionally filed the paperwork with errors, intentionally dressed down, intentionally made herself look like the kind of person William Prescott loved to eat for breakfast. Case number 4492, the clerk droned. City versus Naomi Caldwell. Zoning violation and failure to maintain property structure. Naomi stood up. Her knees popped slightly. Age was a real thing, even for Supreme Court justices, and she walked slowly to the defendant's table. She didn't look at the floor. She looked right at Prescott. He was looking at his watch. "State your name," he muttered, not looking up. "Naomi Caldwell," she said. Her voice was calm, low, and clear. It was a voice that had silenced Senate hearings, but in this acoustic nightmare of a room it sounded soft. Prescott finally looked up. He squinted, his eyes raking over her hoodie, her sweatpants, her empty hands. A smirk curled the corner of his lip. "Miss Caldwell," he said, leaning into his microphone so his voice boomed through the room. "You are aware this is a court of law, not a Walmart checkout line? We have a dress code." The bailiff snickered. A few lawyers in the front row, regulars who depended on Prescott's good side, chuckled politely. Naomi didn't flinch. "I apologize, Your Honor. My luggage was lost in transit. I thought it more important to be here on time than to be fashionable." "Lost in transit," Prescott repeated, mocking her tone. "Fancy way of saying you missed the bus. Look, let's make this quick. You have a shed on 4th Street that's an eyesore. The city wants it down. You haven't responded to 3 letters. Why?" "I never received the letters, Your Honor," Naomi lied smoothly. "This was part of the test. The address on file is for the property itself, which is uninhabited. Proper procedure dictates notice must be sent to the owner's primary residence." Prescott paused. He blinked. For a second, the legal jargon registered, but then his ego took the wheel. He didn't like being corrected on procedure by a woman in a Myrtle Beach hoodie. "Don't quote the law to me, Ms. Caldwell," Prescott sneered. "I am the law in this room. You ignored the city. You're wasting my time. I am simply stating my rights to due process under the—" Bang! The gavel hit the wood so hard it sounded like a gunshot. Silence. Prescott roared. His face turned a deeper shade of red. "You want to play lawyer? Go to law school. Until then, shut your mouth. I'm fining you $500 for the structure and another $500 for wasting the court's time with your attitude." Naomi stood very still. This was it. The trap was set. "With all due respect," Naomi said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming the steel blade she was known for. "You cannot impose a punitive fine for a civil zoning infraction without an evidentiary hearing. That is a violation of the 14th Amendment." The courtroom went dead silent. The lawyers in the front row stopped chuckling. They turned around, looking at the old woman in the hoodie with sudden confusion. That wasn't how people in sweatpants usually spoke. Prescott looked stunned for a split second, but then his arrogance doubled down. He laughed. It was a loud, barking, ugly sound. "The 14th Amendment?" Prescott laughed, wiping a tear from his eye. "Oh, that is rich. Listen to her. She's been watching too much TV. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. In Oak Creek, the Constitution is what I say it is. Now get out of my face before I hold you in contempt and throw you in a cell for the weekend." Naomi didn't move. "Is that a threat, Judge Prescott?" "It's a promise," he spat. Bailiff, remove this woman. And Mitchum, check her for warrants. Usually when they talk this much, they're hiding something. Mitchum the bailiff lumbered forward, grabbing Naomi's arm with a grip that was far too tight. "Come on, lady," Mitchum grunted. "Let's go." Naomi pulled her arm back with surprising strength. She fixed Mitchum with a look that could have frozen water. "Do not touch me." Then she turned back to Prescott. "You have made a grave error today, William," she said. She dropped the "Your Honor." Prescott stood up, his veins bulging in his neck. "That's it. 30 days. Contempt of court. Lock her up. Get her out of my sight." As Mitchum grabbed her again, dragging her toward the holding cells, Naomi didn't struggle. She didn't scream. She simply maintained eye contact with the judge, her face an unreadable mask of calm. She allowed herself to be led away. She allowed the heavy metal door to slam shut behind her. She allowed them to take her fingerprints. Prescott thought he had just crushed another bug. He didn't know he had just swallowed poison. The holding cell in the basement of the courthouse was worse than the courtroom. It smelled of mildew and unwashed bodies. There was a single metal bench bolted to the wall, and a toilet in the corner that looked like a health hazard. Naomi sat on the bench, keeping her back straight. They had taken her phone. They had taken her tote bag. But they hadn't taken her mind. There were 2 other women in the cell. One was a young girl, maybe 19, with streaked mascara running down her cheeks. The other was a tough-looking woman in her 40s with a bruise on her jaw. The tough woman looked at Naomi. "What you in for, Mama? Shoplifting?" Naomi smoothed the fabric of her sweatpants. "Contempt of court." The woman whistled. "You mouthed off to Prescott? You got a death wish? That man is the devil. He put my brother away for 5 years for having a joint in his pocket. He is a tyrant," Naomi agreed quietly. "But tyrants always have a weakness." "Yeah? What's his?" the woman asked. "He thinks he's untouchable," Naomi said. "Arrogance is a slow-acting venom. You don't feel it until you're already dead." The young girl sniffled. "I'm scared. I didn't have the money for the bail. I'm going to lose my job at the diner." Naomi turned to her, her expression softening. "What is your name, child?" "Becky," the girl whispered. "Becky, listen to me," Naomi said, her voice carrying that maternal authority that made people listen. "You are not going to lose your job. When I get out of here, I'm going to make a phone call." The tough woman laughed harshly. "When you get out? Mama, you got 30 days. By the time you get out, Prescott will have forgotten you even exist." Naomi smiled. It was a small, terrifying smile. "He won't forget," Naomi said. "I'm going to make sure he remembers my name for the rest of his miserable life." Meanwhile, upstairs, Judge Prescott was having lunch in his chambers. He was eating a messy meatball sub, getting marinara sauce on his tie. He was laughing with a local defense attorney, a slimy man named Greg Henderson. "Did you see her?" Prescott chuckled, his mouth full. Quoting the 14th Amendment. "Who does she think she is? I swear these people watch one episode of Law and Order and think they're Thurgood Marshall." Henderson laughed nervously. "She did speak well, though, Bill. Did you notice her diction? It was educated." "Educated?" Prescott scoffed. "Please! She's probably a retired school librarian who got bitter. She's nobody. Just another nuisance in my court. You gave her 30 days, Bill, for a zoning hearing. Isn't that a bit steep?" Prescott wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "It's about respect, Greg. You let one of them talk back, they all start doing it. I have to maintain order. Besides, who's she going to call? The ACLU? They don't come down to Oak Creek." Just then, the door to the chambers opened. It was Susan, the clerk. She looked pale, like sheet-white pale. "Judge," she stammered. "What is it, Susan?" "I'm eating." There's a phone call for you. Line 1. Take a message." Prescott waved a hand. "I can't, Judge." Susan's hands were shaking. "It's the governor's office, and someone from the Department of Justice is on the other line." Prescott froze. The meatball sub hovered halfway to his mouth. "The governor?" He frowned. "What for?" "Probably that ribbon-cutting ceremony next week." "No, sir," Susan whispered. "They're asking about a prisoner, specifically the woman you just held in contempt, Miss Caldwell." Prescott felt a tiny prick of unease in his gut. Just a small one. Caldwell? Why would the governor care about a zoning violator? "I don't know, sir. But the man from the DOJ? He didn't call her Miss Caldwell." Prescott dropped the sub on his plate. "What did he call her?" Susan swallowed hard. "He called her Justice Caldwell." The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed. A fly buzzed against the window pane. "Justice?" Prescott repeated the word, but it felt heavy on his tongue, like lead. Justice Caldwell. He tried to search his memory. Caldwell. Caldwell. He knew the name. Where did he know the name from? He turned to his computer and typed Naomi Caldwell into the search bar. The first image that popped up was a formal portrait, a woman in black robes, standing next to the President of the United States. She looked regal, stern, powerful, and she looked exactly like the woman in the Myrtle Beach hoodie he had just thrown in a cage, Justice Naomi Caldwell, the third black woman appointed to the Supreme Court, known for her harsh stance on judicial misconduct and civil rights violations. The blood drained from Judge Prescott's face so fast he nearly fainted. Greg Henderson stood up and backed away. I think I should go, Bill." "Sit down," Prescott hissed. He looked at the screen, then at the door. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. "It's a mistake," he whispered. "It has to be. Why would a Supreme Court justice be in my court wearing sweatpants?" But deep down he knew. He remembered her eyes. He remembered the way she stood. He remembered the, "You have made a grave error." "Susan," Prescott croaked, "get Mitchum."
"Tell him."
"Tell him to bring her up. Now. Immediately. And bring her to my chambers. Not the courtroom. My chambers." "Yes, Judge." Susan ran out. Prescott stood up. His legs felt like jelly. He looked at his tie. There was a stain. He frantically tried to rub it out, but he only smeared the red sauce further. He looked like a butcher. Down in the cell, the heavy door clanked open. Mitchum appeared. He wasn't swaggering this time. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He was holding Naomi's tote bag with two hands, like it was a holy relic. Ms. Caldwell." Mitchum's voice cracked. Naomi looked up slowly. She didn't stand immediately. She let him wait. "Yes, Deputy Mitchum?" The judge would like to see you." "In his chambers." Naomi stood up. She smoothed her hoodie. She looked at the young girl, Becky. "Don't worry, Becky," Naomi said. "I haven't forgotten." She walked to the cell door. Mitchum stepped aside, pressing his back against the wall to give her as much space as possible. "Do you want your bag, ma'am?" Mitchum offered, trembling. "Keep it," Naomi said coldly. "I want my hands free." She walked out of the cell, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. She wasn't walking to a meeting. She was walking to an execution, and Judge Prescott was the one on the block. The walk from the basement holding cells to the judge's chambers on the third floor usually took 5 minutes. For Bailiff Mitchum, walking half a step behind Naomi, it felt like a death march that lasted a century. He didn't dare speak. He didn't dare breathe too loudly. The air around this woman had changed. Down in the cell, she had just been another defiant defendant. Now, in the elevator, she radiated a terrifying, silent power that made the fluorescent lights seem to dim in reverence. When the elevator chimed, Mitchum practically scrambled to open the door for her. "Right this way, ma'am. Justice. Ma'am," Mitchum stammered, sweating through his uniform. They reached the heavy oak door of Chambers 4. Mitchum knocked once, timidly, then pushed it open. Judge William Prescott was standing in the middle of the room. He had taken off his stained tie. He had combed his hair. He was holding a bottle of sparkling water in one hand and a glass in the other, his hands shaking so badly the glass clinked rhythmically against the bottle. "Leave us," Prescott ordered Mitchum, his voice tight and high-pitched. Mitchum fled. He didn't walk. He evaporated, closing the door with a soft click. Naomi stood near the entrance. She didn't move further into the room. She simply looked at him. She looked at the expensive mahogany desk, the framed degrees on the wall, the golf trophies on the shelf, and finally at the man who was currently vibrating with terror. "Justice Caldwell," Prescott began, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace of pain. I simply cannot apologize enough. There has been a terrible misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication. If you had known I was a Supreme Court justice," Naomi finished for him, her voice cool and dry, "you would have treated me with respect." "Is that it?" "Well, yes, of course. Professional courtesy, but because you thought I was just Naomi from 4th Street. She stepped forward. "Because you thought I was a retired nobody with a zoning violation. You treated me like cattle." Prescott swallowed. He set the water down because he was about to drop it. "Now, Justice, let's not be dramatic. I run a tight ship. We get a lot of riffraff in here, sometimes. Sometimes patience wears thin. It's a stressful job. You know that better than anyone." "Do not presume to know what I know," Naomi said. She didn't raise her voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I sat on the bench for the Southern District of New York for 15 years. I have presided over terrorism trials, organized crime RICO cases, and billion-dollar corporate fraud. I have never, not once, denied a citizen their right to be heard. I have never laughed at a defendant." She walked over to the leather guest chairs opposite his desk. She didn't sit. She gripped the back of the chair, her knuckles dark against the leather. "Do you know why I'm here, William?" The shed?" He tried weakly. "There is no shed," Naomi said. "My mother's property on 4th Street was demolished 5 years ago. It's an empty lot. If you had read the file, if you had even glanced at the photos provided by the city inspector, you would have seen that. But you didn't look. You saw a black woman in a hoodie and you stopped thinking." Prescott paled. I can dismiss the case right now. Expunge the record. It'll be like it never happened." "Oh, it happened," Naomi said. "And it has been happening for a long time. I didn't come here for a zoning violation. I came here for Jamal." Prescott blinked. "Jamal?"
Jamal Turner.
"My nephew." The realization hit Prescott like a physical blow. He staggered back against his desk. He remembered the kid. Tattoos, baggy jeans, noise complaint. Prescott had thrown the book at him just to make a point to the gallery. I didn't know he was related to you." "That is the problem." Naomi slammed her hand down on the chair, the sound cracking like a whip. "It shouldn't matter. Justice isn't about who you know. It isn't about bloodlines or connections. It is about the law. And you, William Prescott, have turned this courthouse into your own personal kingdom where you tax the poor to feed your ego." She reached into her hoodie pocket. For a second, Prescott flinched, terrified she had a weapon. She pulled out a small black digital voice recorder. The red light was blinking. "I have been recording since I walked through the metal detectors," Naomi said. "I have you on tape mocking my appearance. I have you refusing to look at evidence. I have you issuing a punitive fine without a hearing. And I have you admitting that the Constitution doesn't apply in your courtroom." Prescott stared at the recorder. His career was flashing before his eyes. The country club membership, the summer house, the power. "You can't use that," he whispered. "Two-party consent state." "Actually," Naomi smiled, "this state has a public official exception. regarding duties performed in a public office. But even if I couldn't use it in court, imagine what this recording will sound like on the 6 p.m. news. Imagine what the State Judicial Conduct Commission will think. Prescott rounded the desk. He was desperate now. He looked sweaty and dangerous. Give me the recorder, Naomi. Let's work this out. I have friends. Powerful friends. The mayor owes me. The police chief owes me. Sit down, Naomi commanded. No, you listen to me. Prescott pointed a shaking finger at her. You think you can come into my town and entrap me?
I'm the victim here! You lied!
You committed perjury by creating a fake dispute. I committed a sting operation, Naomi corrected. And as for your friends, the mayor and the police chief, she glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner. It is 1:15 p.m., right about now. Special Agent Thomas Reynolds of the FBI is walking into the mayor's office with a subpoena for his financial records regarding the construction contracts for the new jail. And I believe the state police are currently executing a search warrant on your home computer. Prescott fell into his chair. His legs simply gave out. My home? You didn't think I came alone, did you? Naomi's voice softened, but it wasn't out of kindness. It was the soft voice a doctor uses when telling a patient the disease is terminal. I have been building this dossier for 6 months. The kickbacks from the private probation company. We know the arrangement, with Henderson to funnel wealthy clients to his firm for lighter sentences. We know the excessive sentencing of minorities to fuel the county's prison labor contract. We know it all, William. Prescott put his head in his hands. He began to sob. It was a pathetic, gasping sound. Please, he begged. I have a family. My daughter's in college. This will ruin them. Naomi looked down at him. She thought of Becky, the girl in the cell crying over losing her diner job. She thought of Jamal, sitting in a cell for playing music too loud. She thought of the hundreds of lives this man had ruined without a second thought. Families destroyed because he wanted to feel big. You should have thought about your family, Naomi said, before you decided to destroy everyone else's. There was a knock at the door, sharp, authoritative. Enter, Naomi said. The door opened. It wasn't Mitchum. It was 2 men in dark suits with earpieces, followed by a uniformed state trooper. The man in the lead suit held up a badge. Judge William Prescott, the agent said. I'm Special Agent Thomas Reynolds, FBI. You are under arrest for racketeering, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and wire fraud. Prescott looked up, his eyes red and wet. He looked at Naomi. He was pleading for a lifeline, for professional courtesy, for mercy. Naomi didn't look away. She didn't smile. She just watched. Stand up, William, Naomi said. It's time to face the music. News travels fast in a small town like Oak Creek, but scandal travels at the speed of light. By the time the FBI agents hauled Judge Prescott out of his chambers, the courthouse lobby was buzzing. Lawyers, clerks, and citizens waiting for their hearings had sensed something was wrong. The usual rhythm of the courthouse, the boredom, the callousness, had been broken by the arrival of the black SUVs outside. Naomi walked out of the chambers first. She was still wearing her hoodie and sweatpants, but the way she walked, head high, strides purposeful, made the outfit look like battle armor. Behind her, Prescott was in handcuffs. He had tried to put his suit jacket on to hide them, but Agent Reynolds hadn't allowed it. He was in his shirt sleeves, the sweat stains visible under his arms. He wasn't bellowing now. He wasn't banging a gavel. He was looking at his shoes, shrinking into himself. They had to walk through the main rotunda to get to the exit. The crowd went silent. Susan, the clerk who had rolled her eyes at everyone earlier, stood with her hand over her mouth. Mitchum, the bully bailiff, was pressed against a pillar, trying to make himself invisible. Naomi stopped in the center of the rotunda. The agents paused, respecting her unspoken command. She turned to face the room. There were about 50 people there. Lawyers who had been complicit in their silence, defendants who had been terrified, families waiting for bad news. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Naomi said. Her voice didn't need a microphone this time. It rang off the marble walls. The silence was absolute. "My name is Justice Naomi Caldwell of the United States, Supreme Court," she announced. A collective gasp rippled through the room. People pulled out their phones. The cameras started recording. "For too long," Naomi continued, gesturing to the man in handcuffs behind her, "this building has been a place of fear. The man you called Your Honor has dishonored this institution. He has sold your rights for profit. He has mocked the weak to please the strong. Today that ends." She looked directly at the row of defense attorneys, the regulars who played golf with Prescott, to the officers of the court who stood by and laughed while the law was trampled, Naomi said, her eyes burning into Greg Henderson. "Do not think you are safe. An audit is coming. If you were part of the corruption, we will find you. If you stayed silent to protect your paycheck, you are unfit to practice law." Henderson looked like he was about to vomit. He loosened his tie, looking for an exit, but the doors were blocked by state troopers. Then Naomi turned her attention to the bench where the families sat. She saw the mother of the girl with the parking ticket. She saw the young man who had been confused about where to stand. "To the citizens of Oak Creek," Naomi said, her voice softening into warmth. "This is your courthouse. It belongs to you, not to the judges, not to the lawyers, and certainly not to the politicians. When the law is broken by those sworn to uphold it, it is not a mistake. It is a crime, and today we are prosecuting that crime." She turned back to Agent Reynolds. "Take him away." The agents nudged Prescott forward. As he passed the crowd, someone started a slow clap. It was the young woman who had been fined for the parking ticket. Then another person joined in. Then another. Soon the entire lobby was erupting in applause. It wasn't a celebration of cruelty. It was the sound of relief. It was the sound of a heavy boot being lifted off their necks. Prescott was shoved through the glass doors, the flash of press cameras outside blinding him. The local news had arrived. He would be the lead story, the humiliated face of corruption. Naomi didn't follow him out. She had one more piece of business. She turned to Mitchum. "Deputy," she said. Mitchum jumped. Yes, Justice? "I believe you have someone in the holding cell. A young woman named Becky and another woman who goes by Mama." Yes, I'll get them right away." "Bring them here," Naomi said. "And bring their paperwork." 10 minutes later, Becky and the older woman were brought up. They looked confused, blinking in the bright light of the lobby. They saw the crowd. They saw the police. And then they saw the old lady in the Myrtle Beach, Hoodie standing in the center of it all like a queen. Becky ran over, her eyes wide.
"Naomi, what?"
"What happened?" "I heard clapping," Naomi smiled. The judge had to leave early. A sudden change in career. She took the paperwork from Mitchum's shaking hands. She glanced at it, then ripped it in half. "You're free to go," Naomi said. "But the bail?" Becky stammered. "There is no bail. The charges were predicated on an unlawful order from a corrupt official. I have vacated them." Naomi looked at Mitchum. "Isn't that right, Deputy?" "Yes, ma'am, absolutely," Mitchum agreed quickly. The tough woman, Mama, looked at Naomi with a mix of shock and respect. "You weren't joking," she said. "You really are the hard karma." "Karma has no deadline," Naomi said. "But sometimes I like to expedite the shipping." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card. She handed it to Becky. "Becky, this is the number for my scholarship fund. We help young women who have been unfairly impacted by the legal system get back into school. You call that number on Monday. You tell them Justice Caldwell sent you. You aren't going to work at that diner forever. You're going to college." Becky burst into tears, hugging Naomi tightly. Naomi patted her back, her eyes looking over the girl's shoulder at the empty bench where Prescott used to sit. The cleaning crew was already there, sweeping up the floor. They were sweeping away the dirt. But Naomi knew the real filth had already been taken out in handcuffs. She walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air felt cleaner. The humidity felt less oppressive. As she descended the stairs, a sleek black sedan pulled up. A young man in a suit got out. Her actual clerk from D.C., David. "Justice Caldwell," David said, opening the door. "We have a flight back to Washington in 3 hours. The confirmation hearings for the new circuit judges start tomorrow." Naomi paused, looking back at the Oak Creek courthouse. She pulled the hood of her Myrtle Beach sweatshirt up over her head. "Let them wait, David," she said, getting into the car. "I think I want to stop and get a cheeseburger first. Justice makes you hungry." While Judge Prescott was being processed at the very county jail he had filled with innocent people, the shock waves of his arrest were turning the quiet power structures of Oak Creek into a disaster zone. Greg Henderson, the defense attorney who had laughed at Naomi's poor diction just an hour earlier, was currently driving his silver Mercedes at 90 miles per hour down the interstate. He wasn't going home. He was going to his office to shred files. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely keep the wheel steady. The image of the old woman in the hoodie, transforming into a Supreme Court justice, was burned into his retinas. He knew what audit meant. It meant they would look at the trust accounts. It meant they would see the consulting fees he paid to a shell company registered in Prescott's wife's name. He screeched into the parking lot of Henderson and Associates. He didn't bother locking his car. He ran inside, ignoring his receptionist, Brenda. "Mr. Henderson?" Brenda asked, looking up from her computer. "The mayor is on line 2. He sounds furious. Tell him I'm dead," Greg shouted, slamming his office door. He dove for his filing cabinet. He needed the Pineview files. This was the twist that nobody in the courtroom, except perhaps Justice Caldwell, had fully grasped. The zoning violation Naomi had been fined for wasn't random. The property she claimed to own on 4th Street was the final holdout in a massive land grab scheme, orchestrated by Mayor Clint Gable and facilitated by Judge Prescott. They had been condemning properties in the historic black neighborhood of Oak Creek, declaring them blighted or citing them for impossible zoning violations, seizing the land and selling it for pennies on the dollar to a private developer to build luxury condos. Greg found the file. His fingers fumbled with the clasp. He had to burn it. If the feds found this, it wasn't just prison. It was life without parole for RICO conspiracy. He grabbed his metal trash can and a lighter. He threw the papers in. Click, click. The lighter sparked but didn't catch. "Come on, you piece of junk!" he screamed. Suddenly his office door opened. It wasn't Brenda. It was a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a cardboard box. Behind her stood 2 uniformed police officers, not local Oak Creek cops, but state troopers. "Mr. Henderson," the woman said calmly, "I'm with the State Bar Association's disciplinary committee. We've received an emergency suspension order for your license." Greg froze, the lighter still in his hand. You can't be here. This is private property. And that," she pointed to the trash can, "is attempted destruction of evidence. Officers." Greg dropped the lighter. As the troopers moved in to cuff him, he looked out the window. He saw the Pineview Development billboard across the street. It showed happy, smiling families in a modern utopia. The billboard was peeling, and now so was his life. Across town, Mayor Clint Gable was in a different kind of panic. He wasn't running, he was entrenching. Gable was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that looked like it had been purchased from a catalog. He sat in his office, the blinds drawn, staring at the television. The news was showing footage of Prescott being shoved into the FBI SUV. "Idiot," Gable muttered, pouring himself a scotch. "Careless, arrogant idiot." He picked up his phone and dialed the chief of police, a man named Chief Miller. "Miller?" Gable barked. "Tell me we have containment. Tell me Prescott is keeping his mouth shut." "I don't know, Mr. Mayor." Miller's voice sounded tiny and distant. "The feds have him in isolation. They aren't letting my guys near him. And, sir, there's a rumor." "What rumor?" "They say Justice Caldwell didn't just bring the FBI. They say she brought a forensic accountant from the IRS." Gable felt the blood drain from his face. The IRS, the FBI looked for crimes. The IRS looked for money. And the money trail led straight to Gable's re-election fund. "Listen to me," Gable hissed. "You go down to the evidence locker, the hard drive from the city planning office. The one we seized from the inspector last year. I need it to disappear. Flooding, electrical fire. I don't care. Just make it gone." I can't do that, Mayor." "What do you mean you can't? I sign your checks? Turn on the news, sir."
Channel 5.
Gable grabbed the remote. He flipped the channel. The screen showed a live feed from outside a diner called Ma's Kitchen. There was a crowd of people cheering, and sitting in the window booth eating a cheeseburger was Naomi Caldwell. But she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was Jamal Turner, her nephew, who had just been released. And sitting next to Jamal was a man Gable recognized with a jolt of terror. It was Arthur Pims, the former city planner. The man Gable had fired and silenced 2 years ago because he refused to sign off on the corrupt zoning maps. The reporter on the screen was breathless. "We are receiving reports that Justice Caldwell is currently conducting an informal debriefing with Arthur Pims, the whistleblower who claims to have proof of a massive embezzlement scheme involving City Hall." Gable dropped the phone. The glass of scotch slipped from his hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. She hadn't just come for the judge. She had come for the whole kingdom. Inside Ma's kitchen, the mood was electric. The owner, a large woman named Ma Higgins, had closed the restaurant to the general public, but she kept the coffee flowing for Naomi and her guests. Naomi wiped a spot of ketchup from her lip. She looked at Jamal. He looked thinner than she remembered, and there was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I'm sorry, Auntie," Jamal said quietly, looking at his hands. "I didn't know you were coming. I didn't want you to see me in that orange jumpsuit." Naomi reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "Jamal, look at me. The shame does not belong to you. The shame belongs to the men who put you there to fill a quota." "But I did play the music loud," Jamal said with a half-smile. "Loud music is a nuisance," Naomi said firmly. "It is not a crime worthy of prison time. They used you, Jamal. They used you and hundreds of others to create a narrative that this neighborhood was dangerous, so they could drive property values down and buy the land cheap." She turned to Arthur Pims. Arthur was a nervous little man with thick glasses clutching a heavy binder like a shield. "Mr. Pims," Naomi said, her voice shifting from aunt to justice, "you are safe now. The Federal Witness Protection Program has been notified, although I doubt you'll need it once the indictments drop. Tell me about the mayor." Arthur opened the binder. He pushed his glasses up his nose. "Mayor Gable and Judge Prescott had a deal," Arthur explained, his voice trembling. "Prescott would impose maximum fines on homeowners in the 4th Street District for minor infractions, uncut grass, peeling paint, cracked sidewalks. When the homeowners couldn't pay the thousands of dollars in fines, the city would place a lien on the house. And then?" Naomi prompted. "Then they would foreclose," Arthur said. "They'd kick the families out, and the mayor would sell the properties to Pineview Holdings for a fraction of their value. Pineview Holdings is owned by the mayor's brother-in-law." Jamal slammed his fist on the table. "They stole our homes. They locked me up so they could steal Grandma's house? That was the plan," Naomi said, her eyes cold. "They thought if they targeted the poor, the marginalized, the people without fancy lawyers, no one would notice. They thought we were invisible." She took a sip of her coffee. "They forgot that even the invisible have a voice, and sometimes," she smiled grimly, "that voice carries the weight of the Supreme Court." Suddenly the bell above the diner door jingled. The room went quiet. Mayor Clint Gable walked in. He was alone. He looked disheveled. He wasn't wearing his usual perfect suit jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and he looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Even though the crisis had only started 3 hours ago, Agent Reynolds and 2 other FBI agents, who had been sitting at the counter eating pie, stood up immediately, hands hovering near their holsters. "Sit down, Agent," Naomi said calmly, not looking away from her burger. "Let the mayor speak." Gable walked to the table. He looked at Arthur Pym's, who shrank back. He looked at Jamal, and then he looked at Naomi. "Justice Caldwell," Gable said. His voice was raspy. We need to talk." "I am eating, Mr. Mayor," Naomi said, "and I generally don't converse with unindicted co-conspirators during my lunch." "You don't understand," Gable pleaded.
Prescott.
He went rogue. "I had no idea about the harsh sentences. I'm a victim of his deception, too. I came here to pledge my full cooperation." Naomi slowly set down her burger. She picked up a napkin and dabbed her mouth. She turned to face him. The glare she gave him was enough to peel the paint off the walls. "Mr. Mayor," she said, "do you know what federal conspiracy carries as a sentence? It's not 30 days. It's 20 years. I didn't—" "Arthur," Naomi said, gesturing to the binder. "Show him page 42. Arthur Pym shakily opened the binder and turned it around. It was a photocopy of an email from Mayor Clint Gable to Judge William Prescott. Subject: 4th Street problem. Body: ramp up the fines. We need the Caldwell lot by November. If the old lady won't sell, condemn it. Make her life hell." Gable stared at the paper. The color drained from his face until he looked like a wax figure. "You knew about the fines," Naomi said softly. "You knew about the liens, and you specifically targeted my mother's property because you thought she was just an old lady who wouldn't fight back." Gable backed away. That's fake. That's forged. It came from your secure server," Agent Reynolds said, stepping forward. "We just finished the mirror image of your hard drive. We have everything, Mayor. The emails, the bank transfers, the kickbacks." Gable looked at the door. For a second he looked like he might run. "Don't," Naomi said. "Don't add resisting arrest to the list. Show some dignity, Clint, for once in your life." Gable slumped. His shoulders collapsed. The arrogance that had held him up for decades evaporated, leaving only a small, greedy man. Agent Reynolds pulled out his handcuffs. "Clint Gable, you are under arrest." As they clicked the cuffs onto the mayor's wrists, Jamal stood up. He walked over to the mayor. Gable flinched, expecting a hit. But Jamal just looked at him. "My name is Jamal Turner," he said. "I'm not a thug, I'm not a statistic. I'm a pre-med student, and I'm the one who's going to watch you go to jail." Gable looked down, unable to meet the young man's eyes. As the agents led the mayor out of the diner, the crowd outside erupted again. It was deafening. It was the sound of a dam breaking. Naomi sighed and picked up a French fry. "Well," she said to Arthur, "that takes care of the local government. Now, about that developer. She wasn't done yet. The hard karma was just getting warmed up." The federal case against Pineview Holdings moved faster than a summer storm, with the former judge and mayor singing like canaries to reduce their own sentences. The developer, a slick tycoon named Charles Thorpe, tried to flee to the Cayman Islands. He didn't make it past the tarmac. The FBI grounded his private jet before the engines even warmed up. But the real drama wasn't the arrest. It was the money. Usually, when the government seizes assets from a criminal enterprise, that money disappears into the black hole of the federal treasury. The victims get a sense of justice, but they rarely get their lives back. The stolen homes were still gone. The equity was still vanished. Naomi Caldwell, however, didn't play by usual rules. 3 months after the arrests, during the asset forfeiture hearing, Naomi filed an amicus curiae brief, a friend of the court filing. In it, she argued a novel legal theory she called restorative justice via community constructive trust. She argued that since the $42 million in Thorpe's accounts were extracted directly from the stolen equity of the 4th Street homeowners, the money shouldn't go to the government. It should go back to the people it was stolen from. The courtroom was packed. The new presiding official, Judge Alcott, a stern but fair woman whom Naomi had mentored years ago, read the brief in silence. The air was thick with tension. Government prosecutors wanted the money. The banks wanted the money. Judge Alcott looked up over her glasses. She looked at the gallery filled with families who had been evicted, including the young girl, Becky. Then she looked at Naomi, who sat quietly in the back row, knitting a scarf. The court finds the logic of Justice Caldwell irrefutable. Judge Alcott ruled, slamming her gavel, "The assets of Pineview Holdings are hereby placed in a trust for the immediate reconstruction of the 4th Street District. The government will not take a dime until every homeowner is made whole." The courtroom erupted. It wasn't just a legal win. It was a transfer of wealth that Oak Creek had never seen before. The hard karma wasn't just punishing the wicked. It was funding the righteous. The bad guys didn't just lose. They were forced to pay for the rebuilding of the very neighborhood they tried to destroy. 1 year later, the Oak Creek County Courthouse looked the same on the outside. But inside, the ghosts had been cleared out. In the state penitentiary, 3 counties over, former Judge William Prescott was no longer Your Honor. He was inmate 9440. His days of lounging in leather chairs were over. He now spent his mornings working in the prison laundry, scrubbing the stains out of other men's uniforms. A poetic irony that wasn't lost on anyone. He had tried to appeal his 20-year sentence, but the appellate court, citing the overwhelming evidence preserved by Justice Caldwell, denied his request in a single sentence. Back in Oak Creek, the empty lot on 4th Street, where Naomi's mother's shed once stood, had been transformed. It wasn't a luxury condo. It was the Caldwell Community Legal Center. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Naomi stood in front of the new brick building. Beside her was Jamal, now finishing his first year of pre-med with a 4.0 GPA. Becky, the girl from the cell, was there too. She was working as the center's receptionist while attending paralegal classes at night. "You did all this, Auntie," Jamal said, adjusting his glasses. "You took down the whole system." Naomi smiled, watching a group of children playing safely on the sidewalk across the street, Outside street that no longer had a blighted designation. "I didn't take it down, Jamal," Naomi corrected him gently. "I just reminded them that the sword of justice cuts both ways. They thought they were the kings of this town. They forgot that even kings have to answer to the law." She looked at the bronze plaque by the door. It didn't have her name on it. It had the names of the families who had reclaimed their homes. "Come on," Naomi said, turning back to her car. "I have a session in Washington on Monday, and I hear there's a new judge in Oak Creek I need to keep an eye on." "Is he corrupt?" Becky asked, worried. Naomi laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "No, he's terrified, and that's exactly how a judge should be. Terrified of getting it wrong." As the sun set over Oak Creek, the shadows didn't feel menacing anymore. The town had learned the hardest lesson of all. You can judge a book by its cover, but if you judge a Supreme Court justice by her hoodie, you're going to get burned. And that is how Justice Naomi Caldwell proved that true power doesn't need a robe or a gavel. It just needs the truth. Judge Prescott thought he was destroying a helpless old woman, but he ended up destroying his own corrupt empire. It's a powerful reminder that we should never underestimate someone based on how they look, and that karma, when served correctly, is the most satisfying verdict of all. What would you have done if you were in Naomi's shoes? Would you have revealed your identity right away? Or would you have waited to trap him like she did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of hard karma and ultimate justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have plenty more tales of revenge, justice, and drama coming your way. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.